Okay, Block 3A, the rest of your lecture to watch before the Dutch Republic this evening. We stopped on the Bill of Rights under William and Mary in 1689. The Bill of Rights were where England becomes a constitutional monarchy. This becomes the hallmark for constitutionalism in Europe. The Petition of Right of 1628, Habeas Corpus Act of 1679, and the Bill of Rights now of 1689 are all part of the English Constitution. Provisions that will be laid out under the Bill of Rights are that the king could not be Roman Catholic, such as laying out that the Catholic heir that had been born in 1688 cannot assume the throne. Laws could be made only with the consent of Parliament. Parliament will have the right to free speech. Having a standing army during time of peace was not legal without parliamentary approval, and that taxation was illegal without parliamentary approval. It's also going to state that excessive bail and cruel and unusual punishments are prohibited, right to trial by jury, due process of law, and reasonable bail would be guaranteed. People would have the right to bear arms unless they are Catholic at this time, provided for free elections to Parliament, and it could be dissolved only by its own consent, and that people had the right to petition. The events of 1688 and 1699 had not quite constituted a democratic revolution at this time. The revolution had placed sovereignty in Parliament, and Parliament represented the upper classes. The age of the aristocratic government lasted at least until 1832, and in many ways until 1928, when women will receive the full right to vote. Power at this time, however, had remained largely in the hands of the nobility and gentry until at least the mid-19th century. Parliament essentially represented just our upper classes, our gentry, and the majority of English people did not have a say in political affairs at this time. The most notable defense of the Glorious Revolution is going to come from political philosopher John Locke in his second treatise of civil government in 1690. Locke is going to maintain that a government that oversteps its proper function, protecting the natural rights of life, liberty, and property, becomes a tyranny. And by natural rights, Locke meant the basic to all men, because all have the ability to reason. Under a tyrannical government, the people have the natural right to rebel. And on the basis of this link, he justified limiting the vote to property owners. He stated that people create a government to protect their natural rights of life, liberty, and property, and this will be his defense for the actions that took place in the Glorious Revolution and is going to come to play a big part in our next unit as we're moving through the Enlightenment. The Toleration Act of 1689 is also going to be passed, and it is going to grant the right to worship for Protestant nonconformists such as Puritans or Quakers, although they would not be able to hold office, so not be able to play a role in Parliament in this decision making. It did not extend these religious liberties to Catholics, Jews, or Unitarians, although they will largely be left alone at this time. The Act of Settlement will also be passed in 1701. It states if King William, who has become our King William III with Mary II that had passed the Bill of Rights, or his sister-in-law Anne should die without children, that the crown would pass to the granddaughter of James I, the Hanoverian Electress, Dowager, just a fancy way for saying the next in line is not a Catholic, or to one of his other Protestant heirs. The Stuarts then will no longer be in our line of succession for the English crown, and when Anne dies in 1714, the sister-in-law of King William III, her Hanoverian heir will assume the throne as George I. In 1707, we have the Act of Union that is passed, and this will unite England and Scotland into what is known as Great Britain. Why would the Scots, after all of this rebellion, want to give up their independence? A couple reasons. The first being that they desperately wanted access to the trade empire of the English, especially in the New World, and for the fear of the Scottish Presbyterians, our majority religion in Scotland, that the Stuarts, who are now staunchly Catholic, who have been the rulers of the Scots, Mary of Scots passing on the crown, and had become the king or holder over both of Scotland and England, might attempt to return to the to the throne of Scotland, and so that a unionship with England would be better. To be with a Protestant country than to possibly have the threat of a Catholic king on the Scottish throne. Because of this decision, within a few decades, Scotland will transform into a modern society with dynamic economic and intellectual growth. In the course of the 18th century, we're going to see the development of the cabinet system of government evolving in England. The term cabinet is going to derive from the small private room in which the English rulers consulted their chief ministers. In the cabinet system, the structure is that the leading ministers will make common policy and conduct the business of the country and must have seats in the support of a majority of the House of Commons. And then the prime minister will become a title that comes to mean the leader of the government. And this will take place during the administration of one of the royal ministers, Sir Robert Walpole, Walpole, who led the cabinet from 1721 to 1742. And the idea developed that the cabinet was responsible to the House of the Commons. So the Hanoverian king, George I, who will rule from 1714 to 1727, our first Hanoverian heir, will normally preside at the cabinet meetings throughout his reign. But his son and our next Hanoverian heir, George II, who will rule from 1727 to 1760, will discontinue this practice, and therefore the influence of the crown in decision-making will accordingly decline at this time. Walpole enjoyed the favor of the monarchy and of the House of Commons, and will become to be called the King's first, or Prime Minister. In the English cabinet system, both legislative power and executive power are held by the leading ministers who form the government. You will pick up with the Dutch Republic in our essential question number 4 with your second lecture of the evening, and answer that essential question on Edmodo. Also, your checkpoint quiz 3.1, 3.2 needs to be completed online by Thursday at midnight.